Shalom, Israel. Fairly quick video. Hopefully it's edifying. Giving all praises to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai Ba'ashem Rakah Kadash. Barakatah Yahweh Barakatah Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostle, elder bishops, great millstone. Much salutations to the brother teaching word for the hopeful elect, soon to be the elect, most high will. To the hopeful extended elect, shalom, blessings. Men, women, and children, contrite spirits, returning back to the most high. And, pastime Gentiles, we've keep telling these unlearned so-called Christians, these American Christians, that, the Gentiles is talking about Israelites in certain scriptures. Other scriptures is talking about the actual Gentiles. That word Gentile come from gentilis, if I'm saying it right, means stranger or, and I'll probably pull a definition. I was looking at this too. Also, it said, now Ephesians 2, revisiting that scripture, it says Ephesians 2:11, wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcised, by which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. So you had Jake's, even born outside, Israelites born outside Jerusalem, just like when they came over here, the Gadites, the Native Americans, it said in the Apocrypha they went to a further land to keep the commandments, and what eventually happened, they started, not keeping the commandments. So when you kind of like away from the core presence of the core group keeping the commandments, is just like in 2 Kings 17:18, it says, Israel went off, but Judah went off also. So it said only Judah remained. First it says only Judah remained, and then Judah went off also. So especially when you, and I'll get to that part where it says we got kicked out of the land, Most High removed us from His sight. So, and then I'll get a scripture talking about the Holy Land. If you're not born in the Holy Land, you'll feel like you're not holy. And that's the way a lot of the ones that would remain in the Holy Land are coming from the essence of the Holy Land that remain, look down at the others. Like, now y'all ain't if you're not uncircumcised, you're basically unholy. Which, is a little truth to that concerning circumcision itself, but not overall. Because what did it say in the scripture? Circumcising them. Before I talk too much, it's like that the scriptures explain itself. It says, you being past Gentiles in the flesh, so they wasn't circumcising their children, all that. And it didn't have to be heinous. It's just like that, you just forget the commandments, or you just go into the world, or you lose hope, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision of the flesh made by hands. Remember, they gloried in the flesh. They was like, you can't be saved, there should be circumcised according to the laws of Moses. That ye, and at that time you were without Yahweh Shai, been aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. That doesn't mean that the Most High is taking in, any bystander of these nations to come in and share the commonwealth of Israel. And I look at commonwealth, it goes back, let me see, let's get it right quick in the Greek.
Strong's G 4174, Politeia.
Politeia. And that's what we keep saying, where's the important Politeia. And it's kind of crazy because it reminds me of that word polite. not that demon dude, but polite, which reminds me of a gentleman. Like people say, well, he's a gentleman because he's polite. Well, a gentleman, that uh, I think those are some of the key words. But you're a gentleman to those that you're familiar with, your own family, your Commonwealth people, not strangers, real strangers. The administration of civil affairs. It's almost like you haven't seen somebody you grew up with, your cousin, your brother in 20 years. He might, he does things differently now. He didn't, went into the world and did worldly things. He didn't, been part of a group before that did this. He had different experiences. So you'd be like, damn, he don't really look the same anymore. He have a different haircut. So it's kind of but he got the same spirit though. You're like, man, remember you go back to old times. So the same thing with Israel right now. We coming back together, and it's we kind of seeing our strange ways of coming back together, but we realize we got the same spirit. These are Israelites. It says a state of commonwealth, administration of civil affairs, citizenship, the rights of a citizen. So that means citizenship to Jerusalem. Because remember, it said Jerusalem is our homeland. He even said, I think, was it David? It says in Psalms, let the tongue cling to the roof of my mouth, if I don't choose Jerusalem as my chief joy. So Jerusalem is a special place for Israel. If you're born outside of Jerusalem, you're like, man, you got to be special to be born in Jerusalem. But what do we say? What is known today in the spirit? That Jerusalem is a people before it is a place. You don't have to be born in Jerusalem. That's why these devils keep saying, well, how are you going to be a Jew and you wasn't even born in Israel? You wasn't even born in Jerusalem and all that. You don't have to be. And that's what they thought back then, that you had to be born in the land to be a part of the services like Passover. But what do you find in history? That it was Alexandria's that went to the Passover. They were some of the main ones. Yes, many Alexandrian Jews traveled to Jerusalem to attend Passover during the Second Temple period. You could drop down to here. It says, would you know about how the diaspora Jews participated? See, so the scattering. Philo Alexandria discussed the deeper allegorical and practical meanings of the festival, showing that he observed both in Jerusalem and abroad. So that's what that passage was too. Devout Jews from every land from which they were born, attending the Passover. And even a kind of an example over here in America, just dealing with American land. The truth came out of One West. It came, over there in New York, I think Harlem to be exact. But you'd be like, man, I wish I was born over there. You know what I'm saying? And many of them came in before the later ones that of different cities that it reached. But just because you're born afar off, and that's what it says in the scripture, I'll get that. That doesn't mean that you're not connected as well as the apostles and elders that were born in that very place of where the truth came out. So this played a thing with Israel, because right here it says, Zechariah 2:12, and the Lord shall inherit Judah his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. See, so everybody was, looking at the Jerusalem. That's the Holy Land. I wanna go there. If I, what's the point of keeping the commandments if I can't go to Jerusalem? If I can't go to the Passover? If I never see the land? You want to feel, close to those elements to, feel like, I'm a really a part of something. But Most High, Yahweh Shai came to teach that it's in the spirit. That's why I said the kingdom was within you. You don't have to be in Jerusalem or go to Jerusalem to be, you know, to feel the essence and embrace your heritage of what we had when we were in Jerusalem, in the very land. Because the Most High, remember, he in 2 Kings, he said he removed us out of his sight. So that means, and even in the Apocrypha, it says, go ye, my children, I become a widow. And who's in our land now? A bastard dwells in our land. It said a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod. So it says, warns Solomon that, King 1 Kings 9:7, where God warns Solomon that if Israel turns away to serve other gods, then will I cut off Israel out of the land which I have given them. So you felt like you was a heathen and a bastard if you wasn't dwelling in the land, if you wasn't born in the land or dwelling in the land or accepted to go to the land, accepted to go to the Passover, which was kept in the land. So, if they just completely took over the land and the heathens are there as well as, Esau, which he is now, you don't want to go there. And then you be like, basically like you become homeless. You be like, where can I go? Where can I keep passing? And then Yahweh Shai even said himself, we'll keep that Passover. Whose house we're going to keep it at? We don't have to be in Jerusalem. We could keep it at and even with the apostles, they say, well, keep it within your own home. You don't have to come all the way to New York to keep the Passover. You don't have to, be with us in a physical form to keep the Passover. So then that's freedom. That's a mercy. Like, oh man, because I didn't know how I was going to get there. It said in the scripture that many, what did it say? The removal was a direct result of God's. The removal was a direct result of breaking God's commandments and engaging in idolatry. I read somewhere it said that it would be hard for many people to attend because of the distance, and that's true. That's true. So it says. Aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world, because, like I said, that hope is broken when you can't you can't make Passover, or you not permitted to go because of being uncircumcised. But now it's like certain things you can't be a part of, but you could come to the Passover. But back then they were strict. So you can imagine. I had another scripture. Job 19:15. They that dwell in mine house and my maids count me for a stranger. I am an alien in their sight. You can become an alien within your own household, man. Your wife and your children can damn, they act like I'm a stranger, man. He said his kinsfolk have failed, verse 14, and my familiar friends have forgotten me. So we could be forgotten, man. You could forget that commonwealth that like we have now in America. So you tell our people, like, look, this is our custom, this is our land, and it seems strange to them because they have been so long without it. They didn't grow up in Jerusalem speaking Hebrew, learning Hebrew customs. So, and they have become established in America where they have American customs now on them. So they're gonna be like, yeah, that seems strange to me. I've been doing it for this long, this way, this long. I've been, even with that Cedric Bajir character, they have that in their head. So when you tell them the truth about a so-called black man being the son of God, they be like, that sounds strange, because they didn't grow up believing that and knowing that, embracing that. You have even that test that they do with the children. They say which was more beautiful, the black doll or the white doll. I'm using those code words, black and white. And they say the white doll looks more prettier because they've been alienated from the truth. So, when it talks about Gentiles, man, in the flesh, because we are, that was basically a lot of things that were basing heathen customs and Gentile customs with. Like, if you are do as a Gentile, that means you are a Gentile, you know, and that's not always the case. It wasn't the case with us, but they they looked at you like a heathen if you wasn't born in, or a stranger if you wasn't born in Jerusalem, and you got, like I said, you got to, back then you'll probably say, well, I'm the great grandfather of David. I mean, son or granddaughter of David, and they were like, well, David's dead, and and his children are lost, or or dead too. Sometimes they believe, just like I think it was Joseph, they believed that was dead. But then when they found out he was still alive, he was like, oh. But you know, you would, and then they would probably see something in your spirit. They'd be like, oh shit, you are the son of David. I could see it in your spirit. But today you would have to need documentation according to these devils. Everything has to be documented. Everything has to be proven carnally. You had to be born. Let's get some records. Like, they got a nerve to say to get what do you call it, benefits for man, the Native American, so-called Native American benefits. And then according to bloodline, you had to, we had to trace, we had to have some documentation, we had to do this and all that, strands of hair, whatever, what the fuck. And then, you're born right here in the land, and you have Godite parents, North American parents, Native American parents. They done been through customs of the powwow and all that. They, they have, they could be vouched for by other Native Americans, and these devils will still be like, yeah, we don't know. We can't put you in on the list for receiving benefits. So that's how these devils are carnally driven, man. And that's how the Jews were back then. The Jew sect, pretty much everything was carnal. That's why Howard Shai said, what did it say? I mean, in the scriptures it says, that's why it talks about a carnal commandments you were driven by, and carnal covenant, and like, if I'm not born this way in that land, and if I haven't been a part of the customs, I can know, what I'm saying? If I've fallen off, I can't get back. What did it say? A just man falleth 7 times, get back. It wasn't talking about these devils, man. It wasn't talking about Edom or these other nations. This is only dealing with our people, us. Where's that scripture? And I think it's a scripture, man. It would probably be harder to find. Come on, man. Not permitted to the custom of the Jews. And that you see that it was a account too, that the woman said it is unlawful for a person of another nation to keep company with the Jews. That's how strict it was, man. Like, we don't even want to see you talking to nobody of another nation. But what if that nation How they know who that other how do they know what that nation is if they look like us? Because back then nations were according to, it could be according to what land you were born in. You know what I'm saying? Because Jerusalem was a holy place. Like, if you born outside of Jerusalem, you must be of another nation, because this is where we dwell. This is where we are. So, what's going on? Then you be like, well, you consider the diaspora and you consider the scattering. You be like, well, damn, he could be a Jew because we got scattered. I'm from Rome, but you could be a Jew. I'm from Sicily. You could be a Jew. I'm from, just like all the way over here in America, you could still be a Jew. Because you'll hear them devils say, oh, you wasn't born, were you born in Jerusalem? How could you be Jew if you wasn't born in Israel? You dumbasses. That was the whole point of Yahweh Shai, coming for the spirit, with the spiritual law, with the spiritual aspect of things. It says with Acts 16:21, where Paul and Silas were accused of at Philippi and teach customs which are not lawful for us to receive, neither to observe, being Romans. So during the time, why didn't it say nor Jew nor Romans? He that is neither Jew nor Roman, because Rome was pretty much the core, even at the time of Yahweh Shai, was the core of our enemy in the opposition of Israel. But it said Greek because that's when we started really get Hellenized and with the customs of these heathens. Hellenistic Jew era. And that's why a lot of adoption of the customs of the Greeks went into the Romans. So we didn't have to be specific about the Romans, because a lot of their practices was of the Greek influences, because they're the same people. But starting with the Greek Empire, and into the Greek Empire, you had the Hellenistic age, and you had revolts like the Maccabean revolt. So that's why it keys in on that specific way of saying at that time of who of and of being Greek and not Roman, because what they Paul said he was a Roman. So why wouldn't they use Roman instead of Greek? And then the officer asked him, "Are thou that Egyptian? Can thou speakest Greek?" So knowing that they were still into those Greek customs and still in Rome speaking Greek, just like over here in America, it's Spanish and English. English is not the only language they speak in America. It's Spanish also, so it has a Latin connection there, and that's why one of the reasons why we tell you that this is Rome all over again. But anyway, before I go too far, we can touch more on this, man. But these are some of the key things that point out that we were the Gentiles in the flesh, concerning fleshly things. Because if Yahweh Shai, when he said, he was telling them Jews because Yahweh Shai was a Jew too. He's the main Jew. He's from the tribe of Judah, and he's the only begotten Son of God. So he's Judah to the max. But he was explaining to them Jews that wasn't living in the spirit of the law. He was saying that y'all do all this carnal stuff, man. Like y'all, that's why he said washing of hands and pots. So they were very carnal, man, and it goes with the land too. And then the customs, how everything was practical. Everything was had to be dead on. Let me see, like on point with you know, on a carnal basis. And Yahweh Shai was like, you know what I'm saying? Like they would say today, if they were still going by the law of Moses of circumcision, they would say, well, the chariots are coming, but y'all can't be saved by the chariots if you ain't circumcised. You be like, oh shit. So you go back in the ghetto and you lose hope, and you be like, man, fuck it then. I'll go sell drugs. I'll do whatever I can, man. I can't make it. That's how they was making them feel. I'm talking about the Gentiles that were Israelites. Just like now. And we saying what Yahweh Shai said, like, you can't make it. Your circumcision is of the heart and not in the carnal. But and then they would be mad at us. And that's kind of like what they say too, with all the, and not so much, but you know, it's a small example of them, the black only Israelites. And we say now the Latin Native Americans are also Israelites. It's that same kind of dissension, that same kind of so-called difference of a Jew or Greek. But, you know, we scattered among all nations, so that means we could be in China, we could be in East India, we could be in parts of Africa and still be Jew, still be a Jew, you know? And like an old saying, it's not where you're from, it's where you're at. And it's kind of it is kind of where you're from and where you're at. Because now we're in America, but we're from Jerusalem, you know? But we're a people before a place. So anyways, Shalom.